Hello, basketball fans, and welcome back to another episode of Baseline to Baseline. As always, you're joined by Ian and Owen. We got a lot to talk about this week, lots of stuff going on. But first, Owen, how's your week going so far?
It's going good. How's yours?
Not bad, not bad. Golf course is opened here today, so probably gonna start golfing here pretty soon. But
Nice.
yeah, you're back at. Oh yeah, you said you were back at school last episode, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit about. We got lots going on. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about LaMarcus Aldridge. He recently, not recently, it was last week, he announced his retirement um, after some health conditions, I guess. He was reading a story about him when it first happened, and he basically had to leave because of heart issues where it was during a game. He said he could feel it felt like his heart was beating out of his chest, and basically the doctor said that if he kept playing that it could hurt his health, so he's retiring. A very short career in Brooklyn, but overall, like, he's had an amazing career, especially in his Portland days. Um, so overall I think he's had a great career. It's just too bad it had to end this way.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks to see him go because he definitely had some more playing time in him, and he definitely could have contributed to Brooklyn and give Brooklyn some meaningful minutes, that's for sure.
Yeah, they would appreciate the depth, especially right now where they're not shorthanded, but they're without James Harden, so more depth the better. So it's too bad. I remember watching him in Portland, and at the time, like when I think he played a little bit with, yeah, he definitely played with Dame, and I think he even played a little bit back when Brandon Roy was there, and he was great. Like he was one of those guys that you looked at late in the game, and he knew that he could score. Like back in his prime, he was a pretty good scorer for a big man, and he was a good shooter. Um, Good on the pick and roll. He could shoot. He was one of those big men at the time that could shoot from a decent distance. Like, I don't think he was cashing threes all the time, but he was a great shooter. So um, I know some people are saying that he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. He might be. I don't know if he's going to be like first ballot, but I think he'll definitely be in the Hall of Fame maybe a few years down the road. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think he'll be a first ballot, but I could definitely see him make
Absolutely. Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the Washington Wizards now. The Wizards have gone on a little bit of a win streak here. It recently ended the other night where they lost to the Spurs, but it was a heck of a game. They lost 146 to 143, and they're currently beating the Los Angeles Lakers tonight, right now as we speak. But um, you guys will know the score by the time you listen to this episode. But before their loss to the San Antonio Spurs, they won, excuse me, eight in a row. Some of the most notable wins you could say were against the Warriors. The Warriors, I guess, win is a little bit more impressive right now. I would argue because of how Steph is playing. Like, that guy's having an unbelievable season where we talked a little bit about last episode, but he's having an all-time shooting performance in the league right now where he was averaging almost 40 points per game. So I think that's impressive. Um, and then they also beat the Jazz, which is a big one. The Jazz are one of the top teams in the West. Um, Russell Westbrook is having a really good streak. Um, he's been kind of I guess, the topic of discussion lately on sports talk shows of him being accused of stat padding once again. That's always been a talking point with him, but he basically came out and said that he doesn't agree that he's stat padding, and he said that this, even if he is scoring a lot, he's getting a lot of assists, getting a lot of rebounds, it's not an easy thing to do, and he's doing it while they're winning. Um, but Owen, what have you kind of thought? What do you think of Westbrook? Do you think he's stat padding? And then also, what do you think of their winning streak? Because right now they're currently in the last play-in spot for the playoff play-in spot. So what have you thought of them?
they've been impressive. And I mean, obviously going into the season, the defense was going to be a big issue, but I definitely think that uh, they've like recently defensively they have stepped up and they've been playing a lot better than they were before, and they're playing to the level that I expected them to play at the beginning of the season. And maybe it's just because you have two all stars that you're putting together, and Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal. So maybe they just needed some time to learn how to like play together, but they're playing at a high level, and I think that if they can keep playing like this in the play-in tournament, that they can definitely make playoffs.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them to get anybody. Yeah, if they keep playing like this, I think they're going to be decent. But um, like I don't know if their defensive, they've like you mentioned, they're playing so great defensively. I don't know if that's going to be able to hold up for them. As we go into the playoffs, because playoffs are completely different. But we all know Bradley Beal can play, so they need him obviously to keep playing as well as he is. But right now, um, Miami, Charlotte, Washington, and Atlanta, Miami, Charlotte, and Washington are all in the playing game right now. So most likely, um, it's going to be Washington versus Indiana. So that's a winnable game. And then you're probably playing the Nets or the 76ers, though, unfortunately, for that last spot. So it's going to be tough for them to get through it. But Bradley Beal has been playing good. Westbrook has been playing good. Guess we'll see how it goes. But do you think that they could potentially beat? I think that's the way it works. Like if you get in a playing game, I think you're either playing Brooklyn or Philadelphia. I have to double
Yes.
check, but yeah. So
Yeah.
you'd be either playing them. So I don't know. Do you think that they could pull off the upset in one of those matches if they end up making it into the playoffs?
I honestly think that out of all those play-in teams, outside of maybe the Heat, I think they have the best chance because I
Hmm.
think the Heat could pull out an upset too. But I definitely wouldn't like if Russell Westbrook can play to like a high level, and obviously Bradley Beal will put up his 30 points per game. I think that they could, take him to 6 games.
Yeah, Miami's kind of been a kind of confusing team. Like after their run last year, I thought they were going to be one of the top teams in the East, but they're obviously going to make it in the playoff games. Like they'd have to go on a massive slide here for the next 3 weeks or so to not make it in. Because right now, like the team that's just outside of playing games is at 26 wins, and Miami's at 32. But Washington could still fall out. Like they're only at 27 wins, 34 losses, and Chicago's at 26 and 36. Toronto's right there too, 26 and 36. So Toronto could still squeak in there. But anyways, I'm getting a little bit off topic here. Um, so yeah, the Washington have been doing good. So we'll move on here. Hopefully, I'd like to see them make it kind of far because like I think we both had them pretty high on our season preview. Like I think we had them. I don't think we had them super high, but we had them making the playoffs for sure.
Yeah.
And we thought Westbrook was going to be pretty good, which he's been good as of late, but the whole season's not great. Speaking of the Raptors, we got some news. They got re-signed, or they're signing Freddie Gillespie, I believe is how you pronounce it, to a 2-year contract. He's been playing pretty good lately. Like Toronto's been, they've been tough to watch sometimes. Like sometimes they'll have a great game, or they look like they have everything figured out, and then they'll just look terrible again. So that's good news, but also tough to watch the Raptors play right now. So hopefully he can provide a spark for them as he's going to be here for 2 more years. What do you think of the signing?
I mean, I haven't watched a lot of Raptors games, but
Hmm.
the one or two that I have seen where he's played, I mean, he's looked like a good like bench piece for them, like a good rotational piece that can give them some quality minutes.
I also saw today that the Philadelphia 76ers are going to pursue Kyle Lowry this offseason in a sign and trade. So that will be interesting. I don't know if that means that they're going to sign him and then trade him, or they're going to pursue him in a trade. from whoever sign or I believe that means they're going to sign him and trade him, which doesn't make too much sense because they're going to have to sign him to a lot of money for Kyle to agree to it. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. What do you think that they'll most likely trade him away, or do you think they'll hold on to him? It seems kind of silly. Like he's from Philly. He probably wants to be there if he decides to sign there. Um, they'll probably need him for another playoff run next year. It would be kind of strange for them to trade him away.
Yeah, I think like because I saw that too with the sign and trade. I think that means that they'll try and trade for whoever signs him because I think
Yeah,
that just makes more sense.
yeah, but whoever signs him, maybe Toronto will do that. They'll sign him to a like a 1 or 2 year deal for not a ton of money, and then maybe trade him away so it's a little bit easier deal to trade because this deal this year was tough for them to move on from. So maybe Kyle wants to help the Raptors out and he'll sign there and then ask for a trade. I could see that happening because it benefits the Raptors and benefits Kyle because he can kind of choose where he wants to go and he knows that the Raptors are going to get a return for him.
Yeah,
That would be very Masai esque because he knows how to do a good deal. So I'm sure he'll get lots for him. Uh, so today, the Philadelphia 76ers also clinched a playoff spot. But recently, the Jazz became the first team to clinch a playoff spot, and so have the Nets. So we already got teams clinching playoff spots as we're coming to the final stretch here of the season. We only got a few more weeks. So as the weeks get closer here, we're going to start previewing some of those playing games because it's too gonna be too early to do the playoffs as full until we get those playing games settled. So as we get closer, it's kind of too close right now to discuss because it's pretty open in both sides. Like the West playing games are very close, and so are the East. Um, so it's cool to see. I think out of the teams that have clinched so far, obviously the Nets, the front runners, but I keep I keep forgetting about the Jazz. Like I keep I guess not really considering them as a big threat, but they're still a good team. Like I could see them going far. I don't really watch a ton of their games and I always kind of forget about them. But do you think the Jazz could potentially make a long run, especially with the Nuggets out, because that removes any more threats? So really like when you look at the West, if the Lakers get LeBron back in time, um, you got the Lakers, the Clippers, the Suns, and the Jazz, I think are going to be your top four threats in the West. Well, what do you think?
yeah. Honestly, like I'm cheering for the Jazz right now when it comes to the Western Conference. Like the way this team plays is so fundamental. Like they move the ball great, they play great defense, and like they really just they play basketball like the right way. And I think that that's why they're doing so well. And I definitely
Hmm.
think that that could transfer over to playoffs and that they could make a playoff push.
And the Lakers are going to be have a tough route because without LeBron there, they've been really sliding. Like they're in sixth last time I checked, so they're kind of sliding. They're going to have a tough route compared to some of those top teams. Like it, in my opinion, like I'm really rooting for the Suns, just because it's kind of cool to see. Like I was looking at the Suns 2 years ago, they didn't even make the playoffs, and last year they weren't even a playoff team. And all of a sudden, Chris Paul comes and he completely changes the whole franchise. Like before Chris was in Oklahoma City last year, myself included here, and a lot of people who watch basketball kind of looked at Chris like, you know, he's a good player, but can he really lead a team on his own anymore? He's old, he's past his prime from the Clippers, and he goes to Oklahoma City. He takes them to the playoffs. Obviously, a very talented team, other than Chris, but they almost win a playoff series, and now he brings Phoenix to the playoffs, and they're a top team in the West and a very, very possible title contender. Now, I feel like I've underappreciated Chris, and I think he's playing great. Like he's a he's not going to win MVP, but I think he's a very sleeper candidate for
Yeah.
for MVP. I've really enjoyed Phoenix. Have you watched any of their games or anything like that?
Yeah, I've watched a couple for sure. And that's mostly because like Chris Paul is one of my favorite players of all time. I've been a huge fan of him for like ever
Hmm.
since like Lob City days. Like even before I
Oh
was a basketball fan, I loved watching Lob City. And yeah, so like obviously like he was known for having like one of the worst contracts in the league back when he was on Houston.
yeah. Hmm.
And then now he like kind of redeemed his career in Oklahoma and now he's taking Phoenix like to the next level. And I think that just goes to show like when he was playing in Houston with Harden and everybody was saying like, oh, it's Chris Paul's fault. I think that shows that it's wasn't Chris Paul's fault because Chris Paul can lead a team.
Yeah, it just didn't. It wasn't a good mix, which I kind of thought they would work well together. But now looking back at it, like they were, well, they were butting heads a lot, and it just didn't work out. And I feel like I'm just speculating here, obviously, but I feel like Chris really wanted to be the number one guy, and James just wasn't allowing him to score enough or get involved enough. And like James, like when I look at him, yeah, he's an amazing offensive talent, but I don't necessarily think he's like a number one guy that can lead you either. Like the reason why it works out so well for him in Brooklyn is because he doesn't have to worry about being the number one guy. He can just score like he wants to. Like Kyrie and KD, I think, are more number one guys than James, even though he's probably the most talented scorer on the team. And that's saying a lot when you're playing alongside Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant.
Yeah.
Um, man, I got off track there. I think anyways, Chris, yeah, I think he's been underappreciated. And um, I remember watching him in New Orleans when he played for the Hornets at the time, and when he was playing with Tyson Chandler, and that's when he was really in his young, not quite his prime yet, but his really young days. And he's kind of playing like he did back then, where he was moving the ball, getting everybody involved. So yeah, Phoenix I think is my favorites at this point, even though I don't know if they'll pull it off because playoff LeBron, you could always count him out, but then he proves you wrong. And then of course you got to worry about the Clippers, who have looked pretty good in the second half of the season here, with Kawhi playing really well, and Paul George has played pretty well too. I'll admit, they've kind of gotten a little bit better too. Um, but yeah, so would you say the Jazz are your favorite right now in the West, or
In the
your
West, yeah.
yeah, and then who you probably have with the Clippers behind them. At least that's what I would maybe have them if the Jazz were the favorites, maybe the Clippers, the Lakers ish if LeBron returns.
Um, I don't know. I actually like now that like you're talking about it, I think I'd put the Suns as kind of my next one.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking. So you got, yeah. Suns, Jazz, I guess the Lakers, Clippers, um, Denver's out of the question since they lost Jamal. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to be really interesting here as we get closer to the playoffs. I'm really looking forward to it. But the East, though, they're really wide open. That's why I think the Washington could do some damage because obviously you got Brooklyn and Philadelphia, you got Milwaukee, the Knicks. Now the Knicks are gonna make some noise. I think I don't think they're gonna contend by any means, but they're gonna be playing uh, the Atlanta Hawks in the first round if it started today. Now that could be an upset, or I guess it wouldn't necessarily be an upset because they're a higher seed than Atlanta. But when you just talk about the Knicks in general, it seems like it could be an upset.
No matter who they play, it's an upset.
Yeah, yeah. Um, that's going to be a cool playoff series if that ends up happening. And then even like the Celtics and Milwaukee could end up playing each other, which would be really cool. Miami and Philadelphia could also be a really good playoff series. And then Brooklyn, um, potentially playing like Washington, Indiana, Charlotte, or Miami, I guess, could all be interesting. So it's gonna be a lot of good playoff series. I'm getting excited. Um, but yeah, we're gonna move on from just that talk. We want to talk about just one more thing here. It's kind of a controversial thing lately in the NBA world. So Dr. J, everybody knows Dr. J, the Julius Irving. I'm not really sure. He must have been. I think he was talking on a podcast or something, and they were asking him who he would have on his top two. Um, so the basically all-time NBA teams. So he made one first team and a second team. Now I'm just going to read you off the teams, and then we'll talk about it. But so the first team, he has Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Bill Russell, and Wilt Chamberlain. Which is not a bad team. It's a pretty solid team. His second team, he has Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Karl Malone, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Now, they've left off some big names in there, including LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, um, lots, basically, is what those are the ones I can just think off the top of my head here. Um, the second team is arguably better than the first team. The youngest player on any of those teams is Michael Jordan. So it's a bit of a very Dr. J take, I guess. I know Dr. J is usually a pretty smart guy, but it seems like I don't know what it is. Like the battle of like these old players versus the younger players, where the older players just don't respect the younger players anymore, I guess. I don't know, but he doesn't have LeBron on the first team. He doesn't have Michael Jordan on the first team. He doesn't have Shaq on the first team. He doesn't have Magic Johnson on the first team, although he's on the second team. It's just mind blowing. What do you think of his list?
I definitely think it's off to say the least. Uh, I don't know. I mean, he's naming players that he knows probably better than like he's played with some of these guys. Like he's probably closer with some of these guys.
Yeah,
So I guess it makes sense when you think about that. But you also kind of have to look at it objectively. And like objectively, LeBron should be on there. Michael Jordan should be all NBA first team. And just I think he's a little bit off.
yeah. I don't think anybody would argue that you're going to take Jerry West on your team over Michael Jordan. At least I wouldn't. I don't think Dr. J would
No.
either. And I don't think anybody's going to argue you take Oscar Robertson over Magic Johnson. You're also leaving out like some big names. Like I would probably take John Stockton over Oscar Robertson. Um, I know we were just talking about him, but Chris Paul, obviously he's not going to be on an all time team, but like I'd probably take him possibly over Oscar Robertson. Um, like the way Westbrook is playing right now, he's probably going to beat Oscar Robertson's record. Um, Steph Curry, I would take over Oscar Robertson. It's just very, very strange.
It's a very old school team.
Yeah. And then like it's a good team. Like the first team is a good team. Like I would take Wilt. Wilt is probably the only one on there that I would be like, okay, yeah, that's pretty solid. Like I can see why you picked him there. And maybe Bill Russell as well. Like Bill Russell and Wilt are like, okay, yeah, keep those guys there. I can understand that. But then yeah, just Elgin, Jerry Weston, Oscar. Maybe he's seeing something I'm not. Like obviously we didn't get to watch those guys play, but um and we're maybe got glasses on of just the new players. Maybe we got bias glasses. I don't know, but um, it's pretty hard to not imagine LeBron being on anybody's all-time list. But that's just me.
What would if you had to make an all-time list, what would yours be?
Right now, I think even though I'm not a big Curry fan, like you have to have him as your point guard right now, just because he's the greatest shooter of all time. Um, and he's a great passer. He's got multiple championships. Shooting guard, you got to have Michael Jordan. You got LeBron. Power forward, I would probably say Tim Duncan, and then center Shaq, I think. What about you?
Mine's pretty similar, except I think I'm still gonna take Magic Johnson over Curry.
Yeah. I mean, you could go either way. I'm not gonna.
Yeah,
I I'm not gonna. I wouldn't say Curry's a solid pick there. I'm not gonna argue with about it either because I'd probably end up losing the battle because Magic. I feel like Magic would have had more championships if his career didn't get cut short too.
yeah. And then
Um,
I would also take Kareem over Shaq.
yeah, yeah, you can see that too. That's interchangeable. Um,
Yeah, very close though.
yeah, and then you could probably argue like instead of Tim Duncan there, you could have like Kevin Garnett or
Like Dirk.
yeah, Dirk too. I'm missing something. Maybe Karl Malone, I guess. He was
Yeah.
good, but he did win a championship, so that's a little bit tough. Uh, if I'm forgetting somebody else too, I can't think of anyways. But yeah, those are good lists. I'm sure that Julius, maybe I don't know if he'll want to come back and redo that list after the criticism he's taken. He's probably not even on social media, so he probably doesn't care. But Dr. J, if you're listening to this for some reason, you can come on and come and give us your list, and we'll talk about it if you want to come on. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll
Hop on the show.
shoot her a shot. Yeah. All right. Well, that's gonna do it for this week. We'll be back next week, obviously, with more stuff going on. And as we get closer to the playoffs, we'll start looking at some matchups here. But by next week, you probably have a better look at what the play-in games. Maybe there'll be a little bit more separation. If not, the week after, for sure, we will definitely have a better look at what these playing games are going to look like. Although it could very well come down to like the last few games if it keeps staying as tight as it is there. There could be teams flopping in and out for the next 3 weeks or so. So, as always, you can follow me on Twitter at Ian Gustafson12 and on Instagram at IanG318. Owen, where can the folks find you?
You can find me on Instagram at the Owen Lutz, and you can find me on TikTok at Ball of Fame.
I was listening to some of your recent ones, and some of your videos are getting quite a bit of watches. Like your Raptors ones specifically do really well. Like you got like a couple thousand watches on them already, so
Yeah,
it's growing pretty well.
yeah, it is. It's been a lot of fun to do too. And I'm
Yeah.
starting to expand into like more sports too. I've got 2 football ones out right now.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, tell the third or wrong guys about it, and they can go ahead and watch this. I was listening to the which one was it now? Can't remember which one it was, but I was curious, like how long does it take you to do one of those? Like, does it take you a few tries, or do you usually like one shot them a lot of the time?
No, it takes me a lot of outtakes, a lot of cuts, and a lot of attempts.
Yeah, yeah, I bet we'll keep going with it. Um, Make sure you follow the Amateur AOC on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and show our sponsors some love. They've been with us for quite a while now. I've got to say, like well over a year now for sure. Devin and Lang. So go show them some love, and if you haven't bought anything from them, you can use our discount code on your first purchase. So you can use code baseline15 baseline15 at devinandlang.com to get 15% off. So go show them some love. As always, guys, we'll see you next week.
See ya.